everyone. We talk a lot about protein's main gig, right? Building muscle, repairing tissue, making enzymes, the list goes on. But what happens when you've got more amino acids than you need for all that construction? Well, that's where Plan B comes in.
So let's just get right to it. We all know protein is the body's master builder. But what's its backup plan? What happens when all the building jobs are done for the day? Well, it turns out those leftover amino acids can be used for fuel. But it's not as simple as just flipping a switch. Let's dig into how that actually works. You know, the body is just incredibly efficient. It doesn't like to waste anything. So once all those protein synthesis needs are met, any leftover amino acids get a new assignment. They're not just thrown out, they're rerouted to the energy production department. But before an amino acid can get onto the energy highway, it has to pass through a kind of metabolic checkpoint. I like to think of it as a nitrogen toll booth. And to get through, it has to pay a price. And that price? It's the nitrogen group. Every single amino acid has this nitrogen-containing part, and it absolutely, positively has to come off. No exceptions. See, the part of the molecule that's actually useful for energy is the carbon backbone, or the carbon skeleton. That nitrogen is just in the way. So, just as a quick refresher, here's how the body gets rid of that nitrogen. First, it gets stripped off in a process called deamination or transamination. This, however, produces ammonia, which is pretty toxic stuff. So, the liver quickly jumps in, converts that dangerous ammonia into a much safer compound called urea. Then, finally, the kidneys filter that urea out of the blood and we get rid of it. It's a really elegant disposal system when you think about it. Now, these crucial reactions, deamination and transamination, they don't just happen on their own. They need a helper, a coenzyme called pyridoxal phosphate, or PLP for short. And where do we get PLP? You guessed it, from vitamin B6. This is a perfect real-world example of why B vitamins are so critical for protein metabolism. Without enough B6, this whole process gets gummed up. Okay, the nitrogen toll has been paid. The carbon skeleton is now free to go on its merry way and enter the energy pathways. But right away, it comes to a fork in the road, and it has to go one of two ways. It has two possible destinies. And really, it all boils down to this one simple, fundamental difference. One path leads to making new glucose. We call those amino acids glucogenic. The other path? Well, that one leads to things that cannot be turned back into glucose. And we call those ketogenic. This single distinction is the key to understanding everything that comes next. So let's explore that first path, shall we? This is the glucogenic route. And like the name suggests, this is all about making glucose. The name really tells you everything you need to know. You've got gluco for glucose and genic, which means producing. So these are literally the glucose-producing amino acids. Their carbon skeletons have just the right chemical structure to be remodeled into our body's favorite sugar. So how does this happen? Well, once that nitrogen is gone, these carbon skeletons get converted into molecules that you've definitely seen before in carb metabolism. They can become either pyruvate or one of the various intermediates of the citric acid cycle. And because they can become pyruvate or a citric acid cycle intermediate, they have a golden ticket. They can be funneled directly into the pathway called gluconeogenesis, which literally means the creation of new glucose. The body can actually take these old amino acid skeletons and build brand new glucose molecules from scratch. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, let's hit rewind. We're back at that fork in the road. Now let's take the other path, the ketogenic route. And as you can probably guess, this one has a very different final destination. And again, the name is our guide. Keto for ketone bodies and genic for producing. So these are the amino acids that get broken down into the starting materials for ketone bodies, which are an alternative fuel source for the body. In this case, the carbon skeletons are turned into either acetyl-CoA, which you know is this major hub in all of metabolism, or a compound called acetoacetate, which is actually a ketone body itself. These can then be used to make other ketones, or even shunted into pathways to make fat. And here it is. This is the absolute key point of the whole lecture. In humans, that step from pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, it's a one-way street. It is an irreversible reaction. That means once an amino acid skeleton becomes acetyl-CoA, there is no turning back. Its fate is sealed. It can be burned for energy in the citric acid cycle or be used to make ketones or fat, but it can never go backward to become glucose. But you know, biology is never that simple, right? Of course there's a catch.
Some amino acids are what we call metabolically flexible. When they're broken down, they split into different pieces. Some of those pieces can go down the glucogenic path, while other pieces go down the ketogenic path. They get to play for both teams.
So we've covered the what. We have these two distinct paths. But why? Why does the body even bother with this? This is where we get to see metabolism in action, adapting moment by moment to what the body needs. Okay, picture this. You're fasting, or maybe you're on a very low-carb diet. Your blood glucose starts to dip. This is when the glucogenic amino acids become actual lifesavers. They provide the raw material to make new glucose to keep your blood sugar stable for things like your red blood cells, which can only use glucose. At the very same time, the ketogenic amino acids get to work making ketones, providing a vital alternative fuel, especially for your very energy-hungry brain. So we've established that amino acids can be used for fuel, but are they any good at it? How much bang for your buck do you actually get? Let's look at the final energy tally and compare the payoff. Here's the bottom line. While it's a useful process, breaking down an amino acid for energy is just generally less efficient than burning glucose or a fatty acid. Think of protein as a really good backup generator, but it's not the main power plant. And this chart just makes it crystal clear. Let's just compare the approximate ATP yield from a single molecule. On the left, one molecule of the amino acid alanine gets you about 14 ATP. Not bad. But look at the middle. A single molecule of glucose gets you more than double that, somewhere around 30 to 32 ATP. But then look at the fatty acid on the right. One molecule of palmitic acid yields a whopping 106 ATP. It's not even close. And this is exactly why fat is our body's preferred long-term energy storage. It's just unbelievably energy dense. So we've seen the pathways, and we've seen the payoffs. Your body is constantly making these strategic decisions, shuttling fuel to make glucose or shuttling it to make ketones. This brings us to the most important question of all. What's pulling the levers? What are the signals that tell the body which path to take at any given moment? Well, that's a story all about hormones, and that's exactly what we'll dive into next.